Hello, my name is Billy Dunn, and I will be discussing the axial and appendicular skeleton bones. First, we'll start with the axial skeleton, the anterior skull. We'll start with the nasal, which would be right here. Second, the ethmoid, which is kind of deep in the eye socket there. The sphenoid, right here. The lacrimal, which is right there. Maxilla, right here. The mandible, that would be right here. The vomer, which is inside the nasal cavity. Zygomatic, which would be here. And the frontal, which would be actually right here. Next, I'd like to discuss the posterior skull. The parietal, which would be right here. Occipital would be right here. Temporal, right here. And the mandible, which is right here. I'd like to discuss the lateral skull. The lateral portion of the skull will discuss the ethmoid again. It's kind of deep inside, so it's a little difficult to see, but it's deep behind in the eye socket. That would be the ethmoid, the frontal, right here. The lacrimal, it's deep in there. The mandible, right here. Maxilla would be right here. Nasal, right here. Occipital, that's right here. Parietal or parietal, it's kind of up here. It's hard to see from this angle. Temporal, it's kind of along the size of the temple. And the zygomatic, get that area for you. That would be right here. Next, I'd like to discuss the inferior skull. So I'll have to take the cranium off. And for that, the ethmoid, that would be right here. The ethmoid. The frontal, right here. Occipital, that would be right here. Parietal or parietal. If I put this back on, that would be right here. The sphenoid, right here. And the temporal. Next, I'll be discussing the vertebral column. We'll start with the cervical vertebrae, which would be right here. The atlas, that would be the first bone, right here. The axis, that's the second bone, right here. The lumbar vertebrae, I think the last 5 bones right here. The thoracic vertebrae would be like these 12 bones in here. The sacrum, just like the tailbone, that would be right here. The coccyx, that would be this point here, kind of like an upside down triangle. Now I'll be discussing the thoracic cage. We'll start with the manubrium of the sternum, which would be right here. The body of the sternum, right here. The true ribs, right here. Those are the true ribs. The false ribs, down here. The floating ribs are behind, right here. They're not attached. Okay, now I'll be discussing the appendicular skeleton, the pectoral girdle, and upper limbs. I'm going to start with the posterior position of the skeleton, and we'll start with the clavicle. Actually, we'll go back to anterior. Clavicle would be right here. Back to posterior, we'll go with the scapula, which is right here. Humerus, right here. Radius, which is the outer portion of the arm. The ulna, right here. We'll discuss the hands and wrists. And we'll start with the capitate. Capitate would be this one here. The hamate, right here. The lunate, which is right here, the upper part close to the wrist where it bends. The scaphoid, which is right here, kind of where the screw is. The sesamoid, right here in the middle of the thumb. Trapezium, that would be here on the side. That bone there on the side of the thumb. Metacarpal, that's the upper fingers. The phalange, which would be the lower part of the fingers. The pisiform, right here. Trapezoid, right here. Actually right there. That's the trapezoid. And the triquetrum, that would be right here, kind of where the screw is in the pinky bone. We'll be discussing the pelvic girdle and lower limbs. And we'll start with the ilium. That would be right here. Ischium, that would be right here. The pubic, is right here. The femur is this bone here. The patella is this bone here. Tibia, this inner bone. Fibula is the outer bone. Last, I'll be discussing the ankle and foot. The ankle and foot, we'll start with the calcaneus, which is like the heel, the cuboid, this bone right here, this bone right here, the intermediate cuneiform is this one here, that bone there. The lateral cuneiform is this bone here. Medial cuneiform, that would be this bone here. Metatarsal, right here. Navicular, right here. The phalange, which would be right here. And lastly, the talus, which would be like the ankle. And that concludes my presentation of the axial and appendicular bones of the body. Again, this is Billy Dunn. Thank you.